Welcome back, everybody, to episode 3 of The Wildly Unexplained. I'm Gary.
And I'm Danny. What's up, Gary? We got a lot to unpack this time.
Yes, we do. Today's episode, we're actually going to break it down for y'all. We're going to actually really we're going to peel back the layers here for most of these cases that David Paulides has kind of pulled together for us. And we're going to kind of see, what some of the major points are to make them a definable case for Paulides' research.
Exactly. Yeah, these cases, I believe, he's got a certain criteria or profile points that he likes to refer to, and we're gonna go down those profile points and show you what makes these cases so bizarre and how they stand out from other missing persons cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of notate to that, there are specific characteristics about some of these cases that do come up, where Dave, he really kind of separates them out. And it's very interesting, just with the research that you've done, Danny, and, compiling everything that we've brought in, there's just so much, so many different characteristics out there. And honestly, there are some generic ones too that, people could just kind of speculate, that, oh yes, it was this, it was that. But realistically speaking, Paulides actually has a lot of thresholds that have to be met in order for him to actually investigate these cases, which, in my opinion, kind of really gives it a lot more credibility, one, but it makes it that much more interesting because he's not just, succumbing to, the generic, motive intent, behind whatever these cases are.
Yeah, definitely. Because when people hear about missing persons cases in the wild, they're like, people go in the wild, they disappear, it happens. But when you see how we differentiate these cases from the others, you'll see that they're not easily explainable by a few different reasons.
Yeah, no, and it's absolutely crazy, to kind of think about that. But in any sense, let's dive in, because I'm super fired up about this. I'm really excited to kind of break break down the cases for us, for us and the listeners here. So the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about in today's episode was the cases that actually don't fit the profile points, Paulides actually does not include in the investigation. So,
which I think are very interesting and important that we cover these before we get into the profile points.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing on there is animal predation. So, like you said earlier, when you hear about a missing hiker, missing hunter, something to that kind of nature, in a national park or wherever, you're thinking, okay, animal got him, for sure, he's gone. End the story. Like that's that.
Yeah, and that typically is what a lot of people link to whenever these people go missing and vanish. Well, probably a mountain lion or a bear got them.
Yeah.
But the problem with that being the case, animal predation cases, typically they're very gruesome, and they leave a lot of evidence behind.
Right, and that's one of the things that, most of these missing 401 cases don't have is evidence.
Right.
So with the animal predation case, yes, it's very gruesome, but more often than not, you can find tracks, you can find, again, evidence to fully support that this was an animal predation case,
Yeah, there's blood, there's scraps of clothing, there's tracks, and typically these people sometimes vanish nearby other people. So, and in the instances that they go missing, you don't actually hear these people screaming in agony. If an animal or a mountain lion grabs you by the neck, you're gonna scream in pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, living out here in Colorado, I mean, we recently had, a hiker that actually got attacked by a mountain lion. Fortunately, this person survived.
Yeah, I recall hearing about that case.
Yeah,
Insane.
very, very strange and very wild, honestly. Very, very scary. But, again, you're going to hear that sort of stuff if you're in the area,
Right.
But if you're not, again, like we've been saying, you're going to find the evidence to support, okay, this was definitely an animal predation case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt about it.
So next on the list is mental health issues and suicidal intent. So, I mean, again, I want to circle back, with the animal predation case, like there's evidence. There's very clear evidence to what the intent was, or, the background and everything. So as far as like mental health issues and suicidal intent, I mean, I kind of chalk this up to, if a person has, mental health history, that's going to be recorded. You know,
Yeah.
if they have a history of depression, you know, or if there's, you know, more mental stuff going on than maybe meets the eye, there's more than likely going to be some sort of, you know, history with that. There's going to be some sort of recording to really, you know, base that evidence off of. And the suicidal intent, I mean, if someone's going out there to commit suicide, they're gonna eventually find the body, you know, or at least find, you know, the bones if it's years afterwards. But, you know,
And typically, they're gonna leave evidence that, you know, they wanted to leave this earth, and maybe their family were privy to the fact that they had suicidal tendencies. So these types of cases, they're more easily explained, and that's why they're not involved in our criteria.
Right. And so the next on the list, the person deliberately wanted to walk away from their life and not be found. So, I mean, again, so a little bit more of a tricky scenario. You know, you've got somebody who just legitimately does not want to be in their life any longer, you know, wants to, you know, essentially fake their own death, you know, and just get themselves out of whatever situation they're in currently. You know, this to me is a little bit more tricky because the intent here is to baffle, you know, whoever is going to be searching for you, you know, and to make it appear like you've literally just disappeared, much like the missing 411 cases.
Right. And if there's any inkling that these people wanted to leave their current lives, you know, then these cases would not make it onto our profiles.
Right, absolutely. And that's one of the biggest points too. And that's where, you know, that bullet point right there kind of makes it a little bit more sticky, you know, to kind of think about it. You know, because look at the Mel Nadell case, you know, where we kind of dove into that last episode.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that one was just like, it was crazy, you know, because the guy was, I mean, avid hunter, you know, everything kept himself in good shape. And, you know, I mean, he did have a hurt ankle or hurt foot, you know, but he still, like, he had a great life, you know, from what it seems on the outside. But then it kind of leads me to think, you know, hey, what if, you know, you ever heard of the adage, you know, you don't judge a book by its cover?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that makes me think of that adage. I mean, and so where it's like, you know, on the outside, this guy had it all. Had a great job, had a loving family, you know, had a daughter he loved so much. But was he really, like, happy? And that kind of, like, brings some questions to me, you know, and for this bullet point, you know, did he just not want to be found? But then it also poses a question for me. How?
Right. When you look at the case we covered and the evidence of the blind and the tracks, if he did manage to just walk away from his life and never be found, he did a great job, almost an excellent job in doing so.
I'd say it was damn near perfect. I mean,
yeah.
No one's found him. I mean, the dude is long gone. You know, if he did in fact, you know, just decide to up and leave, I mean, he's long gone, dude.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
This dude perfected, you know, not being found. You know, not only by, you know, exactly just like stifling, you know, the search and rescue animals and the searchers themselves, but everybody. I mean, everyone included in the effort. I mean, just baffled.
Does not make sense to me at all.
No. But in any sense, the next on the list, and I'm going to combine these two because I think
foul
play, and then also drowning. You know, you're gonna come up with some sort of evidence to, you know, to base your facts on. You know, foul play, crime. You know, obviously there's going to be intent there. There's going to be evidence to support this. You know, everything that kind of goes with it. Drowning, same thing. You know, doesn't necessarily
kidnapping.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and as far as drowning goes, not necessarily intent. Could have slipped and fallen, hit their head, something to that kind of nature. But you're gonna find the body. You're gonna find, you know, some sort of evidence as to what they were doing, you know, prior to, you know, slipping and falling, or, you know, just essentially drowning. You know, so all of those profile points are what, you know, Paulides used to essentially weed out most of the cases that he's taken on, you know. Right. So he uses like these characteristics and like these profile points to say, okay, well, that's you can essentially explain that one, you know, as opposed to most of the ones that he's covered, you know, where it's all right, well, we still don't even know where this dude is, you know, his tracks stop 150 feet from or 150 yards from the campsite. nowhere to be seen. No evidence to support he was even here, aside from the missing footprint, or the footprints and the tracks, and just bizarre.
Yeah, and if you look at a lot of these missing persons cases, you can jot up to any one of these profile points that we just covered. Most of them can be explained to one of these points right here.
Yeah. And, that's, to me, like, kind of what makes things a little bit more intriguing and makes me want to kind of do a little bit more digging on our own, is the fact that they are they're so bizarre. Like the disappearances and everything like that. I mean, even look at, little Keith from last episode. 3 years old, walks essentially 12 miles, on his own through the dark, through the really thick, bush and everything like that, and ends up, with his jacket to his side, face down in the snow, alive, miraculously. But it's just so weird.
Yeah, that was a weird case for sure, man.
Super weird. But in any sense, let's get into the beefy stuff. So let's hit the actual case profile points. I really want to kind of break this one down a little bit further.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of points. I believe some of them are more important than others, but David Paulides did a really good job documenting these different profile points and how they link up to the missing 411 profile. There's a lot of them. Some are more important than others, but let's get right into them, man.
Yeah, 100%, man. So roughly, across the board here, there's about 640 million acres of federal land.
Yeah,
so
which is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. So Paulides has actually found 59 clusters, and that number's continuously grown across the board over the years. So 59 clusters, and we'll define clusters in a minute here, but just think about that. 59 clusters across the board over 640 million acres of federal land. That number is wild.
Yeah, and like you said, that number has gone up over the years with all the cases he's looked into. They just keep going up in number. Yeah,
I mean, just unexplained phenomenon, and it's again just wild. So, a cluster. So for an area to actually qualify as a cluster, there has to be at least 4 cases for it to fit the profile. So again, I want to reiterate here. He's found 59 clusters over the 640 million acres of federal land.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. To me, like, that's insane. I mean, just doing the math here, 4 cases per cluster, that's 236 cases, across the board, in the span of that, of Dave actually doing the research on this. Who knows how much, how many more there are.
Yeah, when you look into these clusters, the bigger clusters have very large amounts of people going missing. So when you look at the cluster map, you can find it online. It's insane how many missing people are in these just concentrated areas across our lands.
Yeah, it's baffling to me, honestly. But some of these locations that actually are more high profile, like spots where Paulides has actually researched. Yosemite in California, Crater Lake in Oregon, Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, and actually the Rocky Mountain National Park right in my backyard in Colorado. Yeah. So those are actually some of the more high profile hotspots. Where the largest clusters are actually located.
Yeah, exactly. And these are very large parks, but when you look at these general areas and you look for missing persons cases in these national parks, you can see just the large group of people that have gone missing in these areas, and a lot of them fit our profile.
Yeah, and it's very scary. Very, very scary. But most of the people who actually go missing out in these national parks are around, they're located, either near or around large bodies of water or boulder fields, which is kind of strange because it kind of like narrows it down to obviously like 2 locations, and that's just national parks, and that's not to really say that that's always going to be the case, because there's no guarantees in life, aside from death and taxes.
Yeah, well, these large bodies of water and boulder fields, those might seem like trivial at first, but when you look at the cases and how many times people are generally found around these areas, it just kind of keeps popping back at you. So that's why we thought it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, it's 100% accurate. And another really kind of weird thing to kind of notate here is the atmospheric events that that take place, either during the disappearance or during the search and rescue efforts. So it's either before or after the person goes missing.
Yeah, because I recall there are some cases where people say that they got separated from the person who went missing, and all of a sudden the weather changed. Also, during the search and rescue efforts, sometimes these atmospheric events come in and they disrupt the rescue efforts. Just like Mel Nadell's case, if you recall, they had to call off the search for a whole day because of a storm that came in.
Yeah, and actually, like they almost got like severely injured, if memory serves.
Yeah, but I mean, when you look at it, is it bad luck? Is it something else? But it seems to happen a lot in these cases.
Yeah, it's wild. So going back to the Tom Messick case, do you recall when the search and rescue dogs were actually sent out?
Yeah, I remember that one.
So our next point here, so our search and rescue dogs, I mean, these are like highly trained, their skill level for finding people, and that is their sole duty, is to go out there, pick up a scent, and find whoever they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
So most of the in a lot of these cases, the search and rescue dogs are unable to pick up a scent, and if they do, they follow to a few feet and then begin acting bizarrely. So they'll actually circle and then sit down. So
yeah.
I'm not sure about you, but I don't know any sort of search and rescue canine that has that behavior. In a case where you're looking for a missing person, the dog just kind of picks up a scent, follows it, and is like, all right, you know what, this is a good spot to sit down. I'm gonna take a break.
Yeah, it almost makes sense when you look at some of these cases where, the trail leads to a certain spot and then just completely vanishes, almost as if the person just was plucked out of the sky.
Right.
But it makes sense why dogs, they're just baffled and they can't seem to find track of these people, and they just automatically stop at one point of the search.
Well, and when these SAR dogs are called in, studies have actually shown that they have a 76% success rate in the field. I mean,
Yeah.
that is a high number. Like that's not like we've got a 15% success rate here, and hopefully we'll find this person. That's 76% success rate.
Oh, they're very effective at what they do.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Time and time again, we see in these cases, they're not so effective.
Right. Well, and again, going back to Mel Nadell, his footprints actually went 150 yards, so about a football field and a half away from the camp. Right?
Yeah.
So if they go 150 yards away from the camp into the forest, mind you, and dogs pick up his scent, pick up his tracks and everything, they get out there to that 150 yard mark, and they're like, all right, well, this is where it ends. He should be here.
Yeah, but that's
And
typically
no
not the
mount.
case. Yeah,
No
the
mount.
dogs, they're not very efficient, and we see it time and time again in these cases. It's pretty bizarre to me.
It's insane is what it is. I mean, so I'm just kind of sitting here just kind of thinking about this, and thinking about these dogs and everything, and like I said earlier, in this bullet point, I mean, they're trained literal professionals.
Yeah.
To go out there, find the scent, find any sort of tracks that you can for this person, and find them.
Yeah, and search and rescue holds these dogs in high regard. They're a very valuable tool out in the field, and most often than not, in these bizarre cases, they're not doing what they're supposed to. They can't seem to find traces of these people.
I mean, they can't.
No.
It's not that they aren't. It's just they can't.
Yeah,
like
there's
they
something
physically
going on.
cannot. I mean, like these dogs are elite, and I say that just in the highest regard. I mean, these dogs are elite.
Yeah.
They are the best at what they can do.
Same goes for the search and rescue teams. They're the very best at what they do. They put a lot of time into it, and the fact that they can't find these people, I don't think it's their fault. I think there's just some variables that we just don't know.
Yeah. Well, and that actually leads us to our next point. So investigators typically don't find tracks 9 times out of 10 cases. So and if they do, they seem to stop inexplicably and lead to nowhere, as if the person just kind of vanished, just poof, gone. And in a lot of these cases, animal attacks are ruled out by experts because there is literally no evidence to support that. No blood, no ripped clothing, nothing.
Exactly. And you can see that in the Mel Nadell case, where the tracks kind of led nowhere and people speculated, well, he was probably grabbed by a mountain lion. Well, there's no evidence of that.
Right. Well, and no gunshots were heard, nothing. There would be some sort of dropped, article of something left behind if this was an animal predation case.
And we've covered it before, and I'm sure we'll cover it again. We see that a lot, and I think we're going to keep seeing that a lot in our cases.
Oh, yeah. 100%, man. So, next bullet point here. The missing are found in areas that kind of seem difficult, but not impossible to reach by foot. And we kind of stumbled across that with Little Keith. We tried to track, kind of like what he kind of went through, with all that. And we found that Les Stroud, a survivalist, an elite at what he does, and I'm going to bring that word back into the mix here, but an elite at surviving. This dude, full-time wilderness guide, survival expert, was on a hit TV series, tried to make this trek of what Little Keith did. And even he says, and you guys can spot check us on this and go look at the video online of him speaking about this case. And even he says, man, like he's a survival expert, somebody who could basically live in the woods and not have to worry. He's like, this is tough.
Yeah, he said he couldn't see how that young kid was able to go that far away, and the time that he did, it didn't make any sense to him.
Right. And it was kind of, it's very, unnerving, honestly, to see a fully grown man, basically, who made his life career in surviving in the wilderness and teaching others how to survive in the wilderness, try to get through the same, not the same exact path, but, seemingly what would be, the most logical path for this little guy to take. And even he's like, all right, so after like a couple hours, it gets dark. Even with a full moon, you can't see shit in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. Just look at all the points, the 2 mountain ranges he had to cross, the distance he had to cross, which was roughly about 12 miles, the darkness out there. He could not see. All those factors came into play, and on top of the fact that there were sub-freezing temperatures that night.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like for me, like that's just, it gives me chills thinking about that. But, a very common example, for a lot of these cases is, children as young as like 2 to 3 years old, going missing and then being found at higher elevations.
Yeah, going back to Jared Adadero's case.
Yeah, exactly. The Jared Adadero case. He was found in a location, and Dave Polides and his cameraman actually made this trek, to the top. And
he was very high up there. As I recall, 550 feet up. I'd have to double check my sources, but he was high. He definitely was.
From where they started, absolutely. Like they were very high, and for Jared to make that trek by himself is very questionable.
Yeah, and the
very,
experts
very questionable.
Said it was a mountain lion attack, and then obviously we covered that case, and the evidence had nothing that suggested it was a mountain lion attack. Right.
And to kind of coat Salanto, the younger, children, going missing and stuff like that, there are a couple cases where the children have their clothes on either backwards or inside out, and the parents claim that they can't even dress themselves.
Yeah, this is a bizarre circumstance and facts of these cases. It still doesn't make any sense to me how, like you said, remember the Jared Adadero's case, his clothes are actually inside out. And if it was a mountain lion, did the mountain lion pull these things, the clothes off him before he ate them?
Well, not to mention the fact that his shoes were placed literally, a couple feet over from him, and the tooth that they actually found was on top of a log, where humus would have absolutely, swallowed this tooth up.
Yeah, definitely. It was, and the shoes and the elevation, the clothing. It was a bizarre case, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, so that brings us to our next point. So the missing are usually found in an area that's been searched previously by search and rescue teams, and could be, once or twice. It could be numerous times, and this is over a period of days, usually a week or longer.
Yeah,
You know,
this is a disturbing fact because I can see how frustrating this could be for search and rescue, and it's an extremely bizarre profile point to say the least.
it sure is. I mean, because if you really think about that, they've combed the area, and these are again trained professionals, who are out there with the intent to find somebody, whether they're deceased or whether they're still living. Hopefully, they're still living.
Yeah.
But these are elite professionals. What they do, they're going out there with the intent to bring this person back home again, whether they're deceased or whether they're alive, and hopefully they're alive.
Yeah, and if you recall the Tom Messick case, they implemented that grid pattern search and they went shoulder to shoulder. They completely covered that area. Now think about all these search and rescue efforts where these people blanket the areas, and then days later, weeks later, the person's found in an area that they've already searched. It's frustrating.
Yeah, no, it is. And to kind of kowtow onto that, if the person is found in some of these cases, they're actually found on the trail that's used to access the area that they're searching. Almost as if they're placed there intentionally, so that they will be found.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and some of these trails where hundreds of people walked back and forth trying to find them, and then just all of a sudden they pop up right there. It's almost as if whatever's placing these people here is taunting the search and rescue efforts.
It definitely seems like like a taunt effort, kind of like hey, you guys couldn't find him before, but here he is now.
Yeah, it's bizarre to me. I don't know how to explain that one for sure.
So kind of going back to the Jared Adadero case, what I previously mentioned about his shoes. So in a lot of these cases, the shoes actually tend to go missing. Either whether it be one or if it's both. They're found in bizarre places in high altitudes or in tough terrain, and the socks or the soles of their feet don't have a speck of dirt or wear around them.
Yeah.
And so going back to that Jared Adadero case, I want to kind of touch bases on that, because his shoes were actually removed, and they were placed, and if I do recall, very neatly, not too far from him. Yeah. And after 3 years of being up on this mountain and being weathered, and they should have been worn, and there should have been some sort of weathering to them, but they were meticulous.
Yeah, they looked as if they were preserved in time almost. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it definitely was. And for me to kind of think about that, I'm like, okay, well, somebody had to have placed them there. Like there's no way in hell you're gonna leave something up, even down here at elevation, so if I leave something outside, it's gonna get weathered. The sun's gonna beat down on it, it's gonna lose color, there's gonna be some form of weathering, whether it be from the elements, whether it be from animals, making a nest in it or something to that kind of nature. There's gonna be something that happens to it.
Yeah, and the more we look into these cases and cover them, you'll see just how shoes and socks play a part in a lot of these bizarre cases.
Yeah, and to most of the cases that we've looked into so far, I don't actually recall one that we found where the individual is actually found to be deceased. But for those cases, the cause of death is almost never determined. And I wanted to kind of touch on that for a second because, I know that we've covered a lot of quote-unquote missing people.
Yeah.
We've covered one that's been found, but he was fortunately found alive. So thank goodness for that. But we haven't covered any that were actually found to be deceased.
Yeah, and we'll get into them. Definitely.
We absolutely will. But for now, we'll kind of just cover this. So when they are found, the medical examiners, do their thing, go through their drill and everything. It's almost as if they seem to have died without a cause at all.
Yeah.
So when the medical examiners perform their autopsies and everything, they typically, write down that they died from exposure. For me, it's almost like they have nothing better to write on there, as opposed to like having evidence to support, individual had a heart attack. Individual had, I don't know, something else happened to them.
Yeah.
Blood clot. I don't know.
I've looked into the trying to find the more information on this, and there seems to be a lot of conflicting issues when it comes to determining a cause of death for said people who are actually found. And what it's found typically is if this happens in a small town or whatever, the coroner will give a cause of death that almost not to alarm the populace. And I've seen some cases where like the missing person's family will get a second opinion from another medical examiner. And then this medical examiner tells the family that there's no signs to indicate that said cause of death. So it makes you wonder, like, did they just put that on there just to kind of put it away and be done with it? Are they hiding something? I don't know.
Well, see, and that makes me think, too, because I mean, as a grieving family, I don't know if I could just, deal with, oh yeah, it was exposure. So
Right.
so like to me, so let's go back to Tom Messick. So if he was found and he was found to be deceased, if I were his family, I'd be like, no, there's no way that this guy died from exposure, quote unquote. There's just no way.
Yeah.
If the guy had a heart attack, okay, like that makes a lot more sense than just exposure, because let's break that down. The dude was an avid hunter, avid outdoorsman, was in the army. Like really high up there, and the guy knew how to survive.
Yeah.
So
No,
how is somebody like that going to die from exposure? That makes no sense to me.
No, but I mean, you'll see that a lot in cases where the cause of death is determined to be exposure, animal predation, when obviously the signs and the facts dictate that there was no such thing, drowning when they were never actually in the water. So we'll get into some more of these cases in the future, but definitely when it comes to determining a cause of death, there's something weird that, it just links all these to the profile point that we're talking about here.
Yeah, and honestly, like it's a little annoying to me. How some of these these deaths can be mismarked, intentionally or unintentionally. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, seemingly to me, it seems like you were saying, prior. It seems like they're being mismarked for a purpose, for a reason.
Yeah, and if you look back on, when David Paulides wanted to get a list of all the missing persons cases in our national parks, he was told there is no list. Or like the fact that authorities aren't very cooperative with some of these search and rescue efforts. It almost seems as if either they don't want to know the truth or they're trying to actively hide it, which I don't know at this point.
Well, to that notion there, go back to the Jared Adadero case, where I believe it was the coroner said that he got attacked by a mountain lion.
Yeah.
And a mountain lion expert came in and was like, nah, dude, you're crazy. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
There's no way.
Jared's father hired mountain lion experts to look at the facts of the case, and each one of them told him, like, your son was not killed by a mountain lion. Which
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that
that just brings up the question for me, like, why? Why would you say this to a grieving father, who clearly there was no stomach lacerations or anything like that in the jacket that they found. For Jared, there was nothing to point to a medical or a mountain lion attack.
Yeah.
So
was a
why?
bizarre case. I don't know. The lack of cooperation, it makes no sense to me.
No, it doesn't. But in any sense, if the individuals are found alive, and this is kind of going back to the Keith Parkins case, they usually have memory loss about the entire event. So they don't even remember anything.
Yeah, I've seen this a lot doing my research, and some of these people who are found alive, they just have no idea what happened. They have complete loss of the time frame they were gone. They just have no way of explaining it.
Yeah, and Keith Parkins is a great one to kind of revisit with for this one, because Dave Paulides actually interviews him and actually sits down with him and is like, hey, like, what happened? Like, what do you remember?
Yeah.
And he literally doesn't remember anything. I mean, he didn't know how he got there. The time frame in between to him him leaving the barn to him being found. I mean, that was 19 hours.
Yeah,
That's a lot of time.
It's not exclusive to just that case. I've seen that happen a few times now, and I'm sure we'll get into that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was actually, in one of the cases that we were kind of looking into, there was a toddler that went missing on a very cold night, survived, and then, had a story, that she had told where a wolf had fed her berries from the palm of its hand, and that's how she survived. That's the main reason why she survived.
Yeah, those are pretty bizarre, and I've seen a few of those. I saw another one where a bear took the kid into its den and took care of it. Kids have wild imaginations. I don't think anybody can detest against that, but they're definitely wild stories. It makes you wonder, what did these kids see out there that made them tell this story?
It definitely poses a lot of questions. I mean, if I'm talking to a kid and they're like, "Oh yeah, I survived because a wolf fed me berries out of the palm of its hand," well, one, wolves don't have hands, so what?
Yeah. On top
two,
of the fact that these kids were missing for days and they should have been dehydrated and suffering from hypothermia, but in some cases they're found in relatively good health with no signs that they were missing at all, which just makes it even that more bizarre.
Yeah, no, and it really makes you think, because like you just said, hypothermia, dehydration, those types of, and a human can survive, with dehydration for, a multitude of days, but, the hypothermia, that's not as forgiving.
No, definitely not.
That could take a day or two, to really get somebody. So
it really
it's just very bizarre.
Yeah, how did these kids survive out there? What exactly happened? And why they came up with that story? Is there is there any truth to it? Did they imagine it, or is that just their interpretation of what they saw? I don't know.
Well, and I'm all about kids having a vivid imagination and everything like that. But when it comes to something to that kind of nature, where the kid goes missing, somehow survives, but then claims that the only reason they survived was because of some extraordinary circumstance. It's like, what? Like, yeah, I've heard some crazy stuff from kids, none of which sounded anything like that, but
no,
I think again too, with the circumstances that they do find themselves in, being lost in the woods, dehydrated, damn near hypothermia, I guess anything could happen.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a weird story, and I'd like to get more information on that, but I don't know what these kids saw out there that made them tell these kind of stories.
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about that. But so a lot of these cases that we are breaking down and we're talking about and kind of researching, the people who are involved typically go missing for about a week or so. But what's kind of weird is that they died a day or two prior to being found. Which then you can kind of question, where were they during the time that they were missing, as well as kind of what happened to them.
Yeah. This is definitely bizarre, because when you think of it, just think about that for a second, because if they died only a day or two prior to being found, and they were out there multiple days, you could argue that they were alive during the time the search and rescue efforts were taking place. Helicopters, dogs, search and rescue personnel. Why weren't these people screaming for help? Why weren't they able to be found? It really makes you wonder what was going on at the time. Did they just venture that far out that they just were nowhere near in sight of the search and rescue? Who knows?
Yeah, and for me it poses so many questions, just because of the fact, a lot of the which you just covered, but if they died 1 to 2 days prior to being found, why couldn't they, or how, I guess is a better way of kind of saying this, but how could they not have realized that there were people out there searching for them? Again, were they just so far out there that they just didn't have any sort of notion that there are people looking for me, maybe I should scream?
I don't know. I feel like this profile point might have a more bizarre explanation to it that meets the eye, because I've also, trying to do research for these profile points, I've found also that sometimes people who are lost say that the reference of time kind of changes. It seems sometimes when people are found, they say that the sun never went down. It was always light out when they were missing, and then they're told that they were gone for multiple days. which doesn't make any sense. What's going on with these people that are they not around the same area, the same zone that the search and rescue efforts are taking place? I mean, we can go down some crazy theories on this one, but this one's definitely a little bizarre.
Well, and I mean, like to me, like that, like, did you enter like another world? Like,
Yeah.
it's some sort of phenomenon where where day is just like constantly day. I mean, look at Alaska. Alaska has a multitude of months that are just daylight.
Yeah.
So that to me is like, okay, like I get it. Like, all right, but when you're in a place like California, Colorado, we have nighttime.
Yeah.
So what the hell is happening?
Yeah, and if it happened in Alaska, okay, yeah, exactly. There's no reason to probe any deeper into that. But then you see these cases down here in the States where people say that these things happen to them. It makes you wonder. There's also cases where people say they got lost in the woods and eventually found their way back, and they have no idea how so much time had passed from the point they were missing to when they found their way.
Yeah. Well, and like I don't know. For me, like that's just it's super strange, to the point where I just don't understand it.
I don't know. It's definitely a weird one. I'd like to eventually in the future get into that one, but there's a lot of cases out there about this kind of stuff. We'll have to probe deeper and try to get a better understanding of what's going on here.
Yeah, and I have no doubt in my mind that we'll cover, we'll eventually cover some sort of form of this, of these cases where, kind of dig a little bit more deeper into it. But for now, we'll just kind of stick to the basics and go from there. But, a lot of the folks that do end up on, missing 411 or are being researched or searched for, or something to that kind of degree, a lot of them are, from either side of the intellectual spectrum. And what I mean by that is, people who have, intellectual, divergencies or disabilities, or people who are working as, who have a career as a scientist, a physicist, somebody of like an extremely intelligent caliber, versus somebody who has, like some form of intellectual disability.
Yeah. And the physicist, that one's perplexing to me. I mean, as I recall doing research into that one pops up more frequent than you would think. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it's definitely something to look into. That one doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, why they go missing so often.
Well, and to that point, for me, it almost feels like they're on the verge of discovering something, or maybe even creating something, and somebody, whoever it is, don't know, but wants to shut them up.
Yeah,
that's what that says to me. Because let's think about that. Somebody who's that, who's a physicist, who's studied that for years and who has made a career out of that, or even a scientist for that matter. They go out there, whatever they're doing, and we'll have to kind of, do a little bit more research on, some of the cases that do involve, people of that caliber, so we can really kind of understand what it was they were researching, what it was they were working on. But to stick to this, what I'm saying is that, if they were working on something that, could have been like, maybe even life-changing for some people, and, a certain somebody doesn't want them to, to release this knowledge or this information, boom, they disappear. Oh man, we can just wipe our hands with this. Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when you look at this profile, people from both ends of the intellectual spectrum, it almost seems as if some of these cases, the people are hand-picked to go missing. I know that sounds weird, but that's the first thing I get from reading that.
Well, and to be honest, I think that coattails onto my point very nicely. Because of the fact, I mean, if they are a high profile person where they've come up with some sort of idea, or or have created something that could be essentially helpful to others. I mean, and we could dive down a huge rabbit hole with this one, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
But what it comes down to is like, what were these people? What were they focused on? What were they exploring? What were they creating? And then all of a sudden, why did they go missing?
I don't know. That's definitely an interesting profile point, and there's a lot more sub-profile points that that we can get into. I've heard some that people of German descent typically go missing more often than others. That that one's not as important, but I've seen some sub-profile points in the future maybe we can cover. But that's just one of those.
Man, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So to kind of coattail back onto the spectrums of kind of classifying some of these cases and everything, there's a physical spectrum as well that we have to kind of look at.
Yeah.
So we've got cases that we've explored that where people are physically disabled. Look at Tom Messick, had a bad knee, had one eye that he couldn't see out of.
Yeah.
Then we've got Mel Nadell. Super
hurt
fit.
his knee, before he disappeared.
Yeah, 100%. And Mel Nadell, was a black belt. Guy was very fit. He was an avid hunter, avid outdoorsman. So there's two sides of the spectrum here where I think personally, it's either you've got a physical ailment, and in Mel Nadell's case, he did have a hurt leg as well. So he was quote unquote physically disabled at the time of his missing.
Yeah, because we've seen these cases where obviously we've already covered cases where Tom had bad knees and Mel actually hurt his knee prior to disappearing. But I've also in my research found that there's endurance runners, individuals who are extremely fit, who hike for a living, who can cover many miles. These people also go missing and disappear, so you see on both ends of the spectrum here.
But I also think another really good point though to kind of bring up to speed with this is that Tom, in the case of like Tom versus Mel, in the sense of like having like a physical ailment, Tom was 82, Mel was 61. Big difference. I mean, like my uncle back home, I mean, bless his heart. I mean, he's still hiking, he's still hunting. I mean, like this dude is like an animal. I mean, and he's in his 80s now. So it's for me, it's like okay, I've got a hurt leg. In the case of Mel, that's not necessarily going to stop me from I don't know if I get attacked by something trying to fend for myself.
He's definitely going to fight back.
Exactly, but and then kind of flip the script here. So Tom Messick, 82 years old, U.S. paratrooper, certified badass. He's got a bum leg, he's got one eye. This dude's not gonna, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, and maybe some of our military listeners can kind of set me straight on this, but 82 years old. I mean, you're not gonna. I mean, I know some tough old guys, but I mean, comparing a 61-year-old to an 82-year-old, there's a big difference there.
Yeah. In Tom's case, I don't see Tom venturing too far away from where he was originally at.
No, not even slightly. I mean, that's exactly why he was in a static position, for the drive-by.
Yeah.
So just very weird points to make, as far as that's concerned. But I think we've actually hit a lot of the major profile points here that we wanted to hit. So, I mean, just to kind of wrap things up, I mean, how do you feel about this? Like, this for me just kind of opens up my eyes, like tremendously.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I think it's important that we unpack this and, we separate the cases that actually do get investigated for this profile and the ones that don't, because it kind of puts into perspective. Obviously, there's a lot of people that go missing every year, but we're giving you the profile points that separate that from those, and we're showing you exactly why these cases are so bizarre.
Yeah, and it's and why again why it's so intriguing to us too, because at the end of the day, I mean, we're not just looking into cases that fit a specific profile of being animal predation, mental health issues, so on and so forth. These are really peculiar cases that are some are even still unexplained, or actually all of them are still unexplained. Because if they are found, they have no recollection of what happened. But it's just the cases that are just so otherworldly, that just make zero sense to anybody.
Yeah, and looking at these profile points, it sets the tone for when we cover future cases, so people can see how these cases are determined and classified into such sections. But I believe there's a lot more cases that we need to cover, and I think they just get weirder and weirder.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I'm pretty pumped up about, a couple of our next cases that we have coming up. But, I want to kind of, enlist the listeners here. And if you guys have any sort of cases that you want us to look into or anything to that kind of nature, please send us a message. You can message us on anchor.fm/the wildly unexplained. You can hit up our Twitter. We have a Facebook and Instagram. Just search The Wildly Unexplained online. You can find our social medias on there. We'll also link them in the description. But if you do have something that you want us to look into and to really kind of, peel apart, please send it to us. Get involved with us. We'd love to have some form of contact with our listeners.
Yeah.
Just to kind of see what you guys, have to say about it as well.
Yeah, you can send us messages. You can also actually, if you go onto our anchor.fm website, you can send us voice messages and we can incorporate them into future episodes.
Huge. Yeah, so if you guys are interested in that, please feel free. But if you do like our podcast, make sure you do subscribe, wherever you do stream it. You don't want to miss an episode. And if you could, please leave a review for us. That's actually huge. It kind of lets us know how we're doing, what we can do to better, these episodes for you guys. Because at the end of the day, we really want to make, quality and resourceful information for you guys, who do choose to listen to us.
Yeah. If you like the podcast and you would like to support more future episodes, you can give us a small donation. The contributions will allow us to get either better recording equipment, acquire more Missing 411 books to bring you better content in the future.
100%, man. Well, I think that's good for us. I'm gonna go ahead and check out here. But thank you guys again for listening to The Wildly Unexplained. I am Gary.
And I'm Danny. It was a pleasure, brother.
Check you, man.